We are live. Good afternoon, Facebook and family, YouTubers. How's everybody doing? This is John Martin. We are at this one more time. Let me move my camera so you can see me. This is the second in our series of conversations of the church in 2020. And where do we go from here? Hope you all are blessed. Hope you all are not living in fear, that you're standing on the God that I know will take care of all of us through these times. I have a group of panelists that I've been knowing for years. They are all wonderful. They are all believers. Rick Law, Brother Jeff Roberts, Bishop Jeffrey Donaldson, and my sister Kathy Rent. I've watched their walk. Their walk has inspired me. Matter of fact, I was licensed the same day the good bishop was ordained as a reverend. He and his nephew Manuel, who is one of my buddies in this thing, and we walked shoulder to shoulder through this. Brother Rick Law has been there for me. He was a supporter of God's Gym and every ministry that I've ever touched. Kathy, I watched grow up in Progressive Baptist Church, knew her parents, and this young woman has been, she's a phenomenal young woman. I just put it to you like that. And she told me the other day she wasn't so young anymore, and it made me feel old. And I'm not going to say how old she was. I just didn't realize it. Still saw Kathy as that young girl who just had all the potential in the world. And Jeff is my twin. The funny story with Jeff, Jeff and I actually met in jail. So we were there to witness. We weren't locked up and wearing the orange suits. Fortunately, that time we got to go home. So let's get right at this again with the people. These, like I say, these times are unprecedented. One of the topics that, and I have a panel group of individuals with Dr. Roy Brown, Dr. Vince Gaddis, and Jeff McElrath, Rick. If you remember him, he was your youth pastor.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, he's pastoring up in upstate New York, almost in Canada now. And a Dr. Charles Osiris, who's a professor of history out at University of California. I think he's Santa Monica. We talk about what's going on, and we've developed these subject topics. And one of those that I thought would be perfect for this group is this first topic. Is COVID-19 a chance for revival or a burden to bear? And let me just give you a little bit of insight as to how we got there with this. Bishop, you say you've seen things happening in your church now that haven't happened before, correct?
Yeah.
We're starting to see, I sit in on Bible study with Pastor Brown and his little church in Donaldsonville, Louisiana. The church population is probably 35. There were about 12 people in Bible study. Now there's 35 with 4 people that are ex-progressive members from all over the country that are sitting in. Yeah. I've talked to pastors with smaller churches and say our numbers are up.
Right.
Kind of like the 9/11 syndrome. Everything's gone bad. Maybe it's time for me to get real with God. And the other side of this, which is another topic that we're going to touch out. The church has left the building. So is this a chance for believers to really get in touch with God without all of the rhetoric and noise that happens around them on Sunday? So back to the topic, is COVID-19 a chance for revival or a burden to bear? Ladies and gentlemen.
Well, I think for me, as I was telling you before, our tithes went up and our costs went down. So since this COVID thing, and really, because the utilities, everything, it went down because we're not in the building. And one thing I found is the generations that are in the 20s and 30s, they don't have as much desire to get back in the building as those that are older. And the thing about it is we've grown online, really. Our church has grown as online church almost equals the physical church. And then another thing we saw is our members, like I said, the Bible study. I got one member in California, one in Miami that have moved a few years ago, and they're in the Bible studies, and it makes them feel connected, especially when they were home alone and they lived by themselves. And they gave them, they were afraid to go out because they had medical problems. And so that brought a closeness there. But really the COVID thing to me, I get so sick of, I've never done well with going to one church's event to another church's event. You're my guest speaker, I'll be your guest speaker. I never like being in that cycle. And we just have events just for church people. And I was an evangelist for a band called Zoe with Paul Lewis. And Paul, he would have me do the altar call. And then one time I just said, "Is anybody here that's not saved?" And everybody said, "No." There was. I said, "Okay, well, there's no need to do all that." And then Paul kind of got upset, but we got to do it. There might be somebody. I said, but every time you have a Christian event, Christians come to it. And we don't really outreach anybody. You can have all the food. You know, you try to take a person in the world, tell them we got Christian band, Christian music, all you can eat, all you can drink. They're still not coming. Then you tell them it's Beyonce or Van Halen, they'll run you over. But I'm just saying that's the difference. And we as the church have been doing the same crazy stuff that corporate America let go a long time ago. If it doesn't make a profit or if it's not drawing people, why do we keep wasting money doing the same thing? And that's being locked out the church. Everybody's had a chance to reevaluate what really works, what's really necessary, and we have to move on from that. I don't want to hog the conversation.
Feel free, anybody to jump in on this.
Well, I find it really intriguing, Jeff, that your ties are up. I'm not surprised your expenses are down.
Right.
But I don't think that we can ignore the fact that every single church that I'm aware of already had some community to build on, and so the incremental growth of having some people be able to check in online, I think, is a good thing. But we do have to kind of think ahead to the future. One of the things that we have here in the Church of the United States, all churches, we have a cultural ethic of individuality, a cultural ethic that comes over into our Christianity, but we really think it's about Jesus and me, not Jesus and other people, Jesus and me. And I think that one of the real risks that we have is the reality is that the church is a community. All of our churches together are a community. And the thing is, moving forward, I'm wondering what kind of a foundation we would have if we just wind up going back to the same old problem of the celebrity church who can afford the bigger show, to the Jeff Donaldson church, which is comfortable being a church for 50. And I see it myself, not in the celebrityness, but what the watchers online are all used to highly professionalized presentations with good sound, without some of the problems we had trying to get ourselves together this morning, with excellent, HD quality, professional narrators and all that sort of thing. And, while this predates some of you in this, to me, I'm worried about us going back to the whole Jim and Tammy Baker, and also, whatever gospel pleases me is what attracts me. Because right now, when I see that, because we basically now can video attend the church in Phoenix about 12:30 our time. We can visually attend the Lombard Mennonite Church in Lombard at 10 o'clock our time, so we can actually do two. And there is a huge difference in the quality of the production between the Arizona church and the Lombard church. And I can't help but notice it every single time. Whereas the Lombard church is depending on Zoom technology. And when it's over, it's over. The Glendale church has gone to YouTube streaming, so they're able to do music, earlier in the week and get it, properly processed, and so it's of higher quality. And the other thing is, if you don't watch it during the absolute exact period that it was live, you still can watch it anytime. You can watch it any week. You can watch it a year from now. And I think that there's something to be said about how our church is going to be seen if we see this as the long, I guess there's now long-term COVID. Well, is the church going to have long-term COVID? What is our trajectory going forward? Because everything that we're doing right now, we're at least building on a base of community that these people know each other, they're committed to each other. Jeff, they're committed to your church. And now if they're old like me, they don't want to come to church. We want to actually, for a time, be able to attend, this way and still be connected to our pastor and our community. But I'm not exactly sure, and that's why we're talking today. What happens as we go forward from here? Do we retain community?
Both of you kind of reverted to the second topic that I haven't brought up yet. Let me go back to revival or burden. Revival. When I think of revival, I think being African American, you have the churches, they do a week-long revival. You get a pastor in there, the one who preaches the best, kind of, it's the traditional thing. But when I think of revival, I think of a spiritual awakening. I think of recharging my spiritual batteries with God. I think about the revival that I get is getting rid of all the noise and getting back in tune with God to rejuvenate who I am in God and not in John Martin. Getting away from all the things that the culture tells you, that America tells you, that the world tells you, and get back in tune with us, saith the Lord. So when we proposed this topic, it was more like, since the church is closed and has left the building, are the relationships with the church, which is us, is it becoming a lot more real than it's been in the past? Is it because you've eliminated all of the production, all of the lights, all of the smoke? You don't have that anymore. You're getting, what did you say? One is just basically a message. The other one is still giving you the production. Is this time, is it a burden because we can't do the production, or is it actually a chance for God's people to say, okay, let me get really close to God right now. I don't have all this interference. That's kind of where we're going. Where and how does this look moving forward?
Well, one of the approaches that at least I took, and I'm a part of a leadership team that serves the church. We obviously have a senior leader or senior leaders that we serve. I posted something on Facebook very early in the pandemic that says COVID-19, the virus versus COVID-19, the cure. And my reasoning is that in our local assembly, what I saw happening is, and just a little bit of background, December 2019, the leadership team, we sat down and we were making plans for 2020. And one of our decisions in December was that for the first quarter of the year, we would do an online format for our Wednesday night service. So we weren't going to be in the building on Wednesday nights anyway. And we were taking the time to get all of our elderly, and when I say elderly, I'm talking about 75, 80 and up, making sure that they were connected so that they would not miss out. So they would, be able to log right on to Wednesday night. And we got good numbers. We started that maybe first or second Wednesday in January. So when the city of Chicago announced that we were going on lockdown, we're in Chicago. We had already migrated to Wednesday nights being online. And what happened to us is, and I don't think it's unique to us. I think it's happening in other places is that, yes, it's been much less production. I'm a worship leader. I'm not playing the keyboard. I'm not leading worship. There was a time we were doing very early morning prayer. I'm not doing very early morning prayer with the saints or with, a group of the saints. What we are doing is we are one-on-one doing Facebook Lives, and, we've been doing Zoom, and the teaching that has been happening has been outstanding. And there's something happening within the hearts of the saints that are a part of our assembly. So much so that we, in our leadership meetings, we've talked about, it says, okay, do we want to share what's going on, or are we okay with this idea of it just being us that's hearing this, or maybe this is something that, other people should have access to. So for us, I don't want to say COVID has been a godsend, because I don't believe that COVID is a godsend. But what I will say is that there is something really significant happening in the hearts of the people that attend our assembly. It is, and I don't think, again, that it is unique to us.
Right.
It's true.
Thank you, Kathy.
And you know, for me with the seniors, it's funny because after we have our Zoom Bible study, I like to wait and see how many of them can log off without having a problem. And you know, it's really funny if you if you get to watch them. They're all like, "Where's this thing at?" Then the phone gets to showing the ceiling in the room and all this. So, you know, but now they've got it because, like I said, we've been doing it for about 2 years. But that is the thing, to make sure that everybody has the technology. And it was really a blessing to me to be able to connect with the members that have moved to other cities and just to have that fellowship again. I have one member that she calls me her forever pastor. You know, wherever she's at, I'm always be her forever pastor. And it's good to keep those connections. But the one thing we have to realize is, since the church has changed, and especially with COVID and African American with diabetes and the things that we battle, and you know, a lot of the older people and high blood pressure, they're not really anxious to come back. And so I go live on Facebook at a certain time. Plus, I do the YouTube where they can watch it at their own leisure. And to me, that's safer for everybody. And those of us that do come into the building, we social distance. I put you by family, you know, rather than 6 feet apart for everybody. But and then we have the other room. I can set up a Facebook on the TV, and some people can watch it in the other room. So we're doing pretty good as far as getting together. And it's good for the people that need that fellowship, because some people, it's just your DNA. I've got to go to church on Sunday. You know, you don't know what to do with it. You feel like you're playing hooky if you're not in church, you know. And so it's good for those people too, you know. So we're a hybrid, I guess, is the best thing you can say.
Okay.
Just think of how technologically capable we've all become now, way
Yes.
beyond what we were. And everybody's upgraded their broadbands, and
Yes.
it's just, I'm so grateful for Zoom, you know, because you know, I never knew what Zoom was until we needed it, and all of a sudden here it was, and just such a. I'm sorry, that was probably a commercial thing. I shouldn't have done that. I think for me, you know, what it's done is, in some ways, maybe stripped away the facade of putting up with the big organized show, like Rick was talking about. I just don't really have any stomach for that anymore, and I haven't for a long time. And you know, I don't even really like going through those motions. You know, this has become really a much more personal journey with God in a lot of ways, and I'm okay with that. There's another smaller church that I will slip over to from time to time, and go in there, and we can still get some hugs in and all that. But you know, it's I've kind of discovered that I like not feeling like I have to go in there on the weekend. It's sad to say that, but that's not theoretical, but I don't miss that necessarily as much as I thought I might. It's kind of opened up things in a lot of ways.
You know, there's a writer named Louis Griswold that was a writer for Atlanta paper, and he wrote a book that said "Sacred Cows Make Great Gourmet Burgers." And that was the title. They make, you know, our excellent gourmet burgers. And some of these things have become sacred cows to us.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and sometimes, you know, because I like to watch some of my friends when they start a Bible study, they'll sit there and say, "Okay, I'm waiting on more people to come. I'm waiting on more people to come." So you've lost everybody that was waiting. Because if I got to wait for 10 minutes for you to wait for everybody that won't show up when they know the time is,
Yeah.
then you've already lost me. Or they'll try to do announcements before they have the service. You can't do online what you did inside. Because you know, people are scrolling for a church service to watch, and they're sitting here saying, "We got to pray for sister, so and so, and we got to do this and that, and we need the building fund." Or you scolding them about their tithes not being coming in. And I don't want to hear your church business. You know, if I'm coming to listen to your service, I want to hear your service. I want to hear a message. I don't want to hear how you mad at so and so and they need to get themselves together and y'all need to get in this building because you're all going to fall away and go to hell. You know, don't chew me out online because I can click away from it.
That's true.
But I see a lot of that. You know, I just been watching and seeing a lot of that going forward. You know, all y'all going to hell because you're not coming to church. You in the virus, if you full of the Spirit and you got the Holy Ghost, the virus won't touch you. You know, and the virus is non-denominational. It will touch you.
Rick, I look like you were going to say something there a minute ago.
Well, actually, I wanted to get back to Catherine for her to define more of what sort of is wonderful that is actually happening. Because you actually said we are talking among ourselves about whether we should share it, but you haven't shared it. So would you share what some of that is so we can hear that?
Most of what we've been doing is actually one of the really unique things that's happened is our senior leader, he's been doing kind of this 9 a.m. Gathering, which would be the equivalent of a Sunday school service. And then we have someone that's in their 20s, a young man in his 20s, recently married, brand new baby. And he's preached week after week after week after week. And what he's been talking about is really getting us back to the central focus of Jesus being preeminent, number one, and Jesus and God as Father. That when you see Jesus, you see the Father. When you see the Father, you see Jesus. So we've spent concentrated time of breaking down all of the other stuff that we've heard for years, and we'll come back to the central theme of that. This is the gospel of the kingdom. This is Jesus's gospel. That Father loves you, Jesus loves you, and when you see Jesus, you see Father. And if you've had, really maybe we'll say it this way, if you've had, bad interactions or bad encounters at a church where they tried to show you that Jesus was one thing and Father was different, we'd like to present something different. We'd like to present that actually when you saw Father in the Old Testament, you were actually seeing Jesus in the Old Testament. And we're just kind of scrolling back, looking at the scriptures again, and it's really not redefining. I don't really like the term redefining, but what we're doing is where some of the definitions were wrong. We're getting the real definition of things.
Say that one more time, Kathy. Say it one more time.
Okay, I said we're not redefining.
Right.
I said what we're doing is we're looking at where some of the definitions were wrong.
Here, I got something for you, Kathy. This is free. You can trademark this.
Okay.
You're real defining.
Yes, that's very good. We are real defining. That's what we're doing.
I'm going to even use that myself.
Use it. But that's what's been happening. And it's been awesome. And the 85-year-old to the 15-year-old has enjoyed it. It's been amazing. And like I said, coming from this 26, 27-year-old, we're all sitting back and we're like, he's prepping week after week after week, and it's been phenomenal.
Jesus said, I am the truth, the way, and the life, and whom the Son sets free. I was talking to Pastor Brown about this the other day. I don't know why I'm doing this. I just know I have to do it. And I was talking to him last night, and I said, there's two people that are on this panel that have to have some responsibility and accountability for me doing this. And it's Rick Law and Jeff Roberts. Rick Law gave me a book somewhere around 2000 in his office called Soul Survivor, How My Faith Survived the Church. And that book changed my life. And Jeff Roberts made a comment to me while I was sitting on my deck in Virginia around 2000, maybe 14, when he said that the American version of Christianity does not work. And those are two jump off points in my life, literally. And yes, it's time to get real. And God has removed all of the stuff that keeps us from being real. I got down here, matter of fact, it'll be 2 years today. My daughter and I showed up in Texas. The first Sunday I was here, there was a church around the corner called One Community, nice building, bigger than what I normally would like to go to, but I looked at them online. It was great, and I did the email. They said, if you're going to be a visit, you come in with your lights flashing. We'll park you in front, right at church. Somebody will come out and meet you. They took me in. They gave me a bag with a coffee mug and shook me and hugged me. And I got in here, and here is this production that looked like Hamilton on Broadway. And I'm sitting here. I mean, this thing. I mean, they got lights. The only thing they didn't have that day, and they got it, was smoke. Okay. And I'm sitting there looking at all these people, and I'm thinking, why do we need all of this?
Mm-hmm.
And by the time the preacher got up to preach, I got tired of standing. The people had been, you're tired. All you want to do is go home and grab a hamburger and go take a nap. So how much of the word did you hear? I mean, we've experienced that, Kathy. We've had some services that musically we just went somewhere else. The old man didn't stop us, and the whole congregation singing. And you get back, and the folks, we got the air conditioning on. Folks got the fans out. They're sweating. They're uncomfortable. Then you want somebody to come up and preach. Roy used to tell me, if they look at their watch, you've been up there too long. If they start tapping it and listening to it, yeah, you. So, but yeah, I see. For me personally, I watch Meeks every Sunday, Salem Baptist. I love the man preaching. I just have to say it. He preaches a message that's relevant to me and my experience and where I am, that's still biblically based right now. I step in and see other people, but it has been it's one-on-one with everything that's happened. It's pushed me into saying, okay, God, what's going on? I'm not handling this well most days, and I need some help down here. And nobody else can help me. And I think that's where a lot of this is taking a whole bunch of believers, man. I see it as a good thing. Man, I'm like Kathy, COVID isn't great. It's created a lot of pain and heartbreak, but I've also understood that pain and heartbreak go hand in hand with the gospel.
I think, times have changed, and maybe that hasn't been obvious to some of the larger churches. Back when I first started listening to Jesus, calling my name, although I wouldn't have put it that way at the time, but I was drawn in to the Willow Creek, to the Big Show, to the Blue Jeans, and the young preacher. I needed that. The small church would not have done it. I wasn't ready for somebody to look that close into my eyes, and I needed the anonymity, and I needed the music, and I need something that was, that reached into me in the places where I could be found. Now, I'm totally done with all that. That stuff just makes me crazy, because it's hiding, it's putting God back up on a high shelf again, instead of getting him down on the low shelf where everybody could reach him, and what he went to so much trouble to do to get to us. And I think now we're in a place where people need those connections. And I think the younger generation sees through the show and wants to know what else is there, and if there's nothing else behind it, or if that gets in the way, then, we're missing the connections that people need to make. I mean, that's the connections I need to make. I don't need to be entertained and amused anymore. I can get that on, lots of places. So, but I need something that's real,
That's the thing that I learned when I went to Calvary, I think in 93 to 97, in Calvary of Naperville.
Yeah.
Those people that don't know.
Praise the Lord, hallelujah.
Right. And we moved from the old tin building to the new fabulous building they have now. But the thing about it is, I learned by going to the white church that you could come to church comfortable. You could wear your regular clothes, and then you can go to the zoo and do other things after on Sunday. Where with the black church, you got to come in your suit, your tie, you go through all this, and by the time you get home and switch to your street clothes, you're like, I don't feel like going nowhere. And then I also learned that you can get the service done in a timely manner. You can start on time, and and there's so much time killed within the black church that the younger people can't connect to, because they're from a more instantaneous society. They get everything at their fingertips. That's why they got the new QB or whatever, that they can only watch 10 to 15 minute programs. whatever that service is called, because
Right.
fan. You know what I'm saying? And coming from that, and coming back to the black church, there are a lot of things that I got rid of. You know, they would the visitors stand up. That's one thing I always hated, because when you go to a church, everybody knows who the visitor is. So there's no need for me to stand. If I have something to say, I'll say it. But do you have a testimony? Oh, well, I was on drugs and I was crazy for 30 years, but the Lord saved me. You know, and I've always been, if your testimony is the same testimony it was last week or the week before, then you haven't grown in Christ. You know, we all have our basic testimony, but if God hasn't done nothing for you since your drug days, then there's something wrong with your walk. So, you know, a lot of that stuff, a lot of the old formalities used to just drive me crazy. And some people get offended. You know, I came to your church and nobody, recognized me. Well, that's not me. And if people don't come to church for a while, the pastor didn't call me, nobody came looking for me. Well, does your job call you if you don't show up for a week or so? They'll send you a letter,
Don't come back.
They're not calling you, begging you to come back, are they? And
Don't come back.
A lot of the legalism has to be dropped. And as we reform the church, we got to look at stuff and see, why did we do it? And is there a purpose for doing it? And then why do we keep doing things that just waste time?
Tradition.
To be more efficient is what I'm talking about. You got to streamline it. And,
The food break's always nice. The food break. I remember when I was
there and said, "What is the best way to make a Model T?" They came up with that and changed the auto industry, and that's what we have to do with the church. What's the best model we can come up with going forward in the church, that we accomplish everything we want to do, everything God is calling us to do? Not that we put God in the box and cut this off and cut that off, but going forward, how do we redeem the time with more urgency? And that's what I'm looking at. That's what God has had me dealing with during this time, is when I come out of this self-imposed or God imposed, whoever imposed it, that what do we do different? And one thing I realized is the church is no longer 22 North Highland for me. The church has been dispersed, just like in Jerusalem. When they sent the trouble and they were attacking everybody, then they were all comfortable. They were going to church. They were having their fellowships, their dinners and everything. And they were persecution came. The gospel went all around the world. Well, God has done that again. He's told us to get out the building. Now be the church in your community. And that's what we have to learn from this. How do we become a community church and not a building?
Well, we just segued into one of the topics. I'll come back to the pitfalls of the virtual church, and let's talk about that. Effective conversation must lead to effective action. That came about. That topic came about during a conversation about pastors having the ability to, or the skill sets to mobilize the church for a social action. Stand up for righteousness or stand up against injustices. And we've realized that a lot of pastors don't even come with those skill sets. But the conversations through the pulpit or the messages through the pulpit will say those very things by using Jesus as he stood against the injustices of man, as he went into the church and saw the money changers and tipped over the table and basically cussed them out, telling them this is wrong. But nothing happens after Sunday morning. So here's the topic in its entirety. Effective conversation must lead to effective action. It must. The church has left the building. What does that mean moving forward? And should it remain outside of the walls of the building? Was that a bit much to swallow? Do I give it? It's on the side there if you want to look at it again. I think we've talked about the church has left the building. That's obvious. We know that. So now, in all of this that we see, I've listened to several churches. I've listened to several pastors. I've listened to them on their Sunday morning sermons. I've listened to their blogs talking about where we are in America right now and the climate that we live in, with all of the hatred, all the racial injustice, all of the political bias, all of the rhetoric that comes from our leaders in this country. You know, they're like a bunch of little kids fighting on the playground. Let's call it what it is. Nobody's listening. Nobody's getting along. So when these conversations come about and we're having these conversations, are we actually having conversations that will bring forth an action, or are we just spinning our wheels again?
Well, I'm going to try and jump in there somewhere. There's an awful, that was a mighty broad topic.
I know.
One of the real questions that I mean, here we are, we're different ages, we're different races, but what binds all of us together is that we have had some sort of transformational experience with Jesus Christ.
Right.
And one of the things that when you mention racism and all that sort of thing, not to diminish that in any way, but you're not talking about one horrendously huge issue that is part of the backdrop of everything that we do. We are no longer considered to be people who have much of a valid group of values in this current time period.
Wow.
We are in a post-Christian world, and you know, Francis Schaeffer predicted years ago in his book called How Should We Then Live? The Rise and Decline of Western Thought and Culture, that when a democracy leaves its moorings from Judeo-Christian faith, the democracy will perish. And when you look at current political behavior and cultural behavior, where I'm seeing your form of StreamYard that you've got says you're in the show. We as Christians are not in the show. And where have we been showing up? We are not showing up anywhere. We have all of this polarization going on, yet we as Christians, if we are going to be authentic, if we care a bit about revival, if we care anything about having effective conversations, those effective conversations should actually first start among Christians. And then the action should move forward from what Christ calls us to be as a transformational, positive difference in raising the dignity of all human beings. And we're not even talking to each other.
Mm. There's the Rick Law I know.
I was going to say that's a mouthful.
There's the Rick Law I know. Kathy, I mean, he said a mouthful, but you responded. What are your thoughts? Because this is where the rubber meets the road here.
For the last few weeks, the hatred and what's going on politically, and the issues with systemic racism, whatever you want to call it. I attend. I shouldn't say obviously, but I attend a predominantly Black church with Black leadership, and you know, we're looking to have real conversations with people, but sometimes there's a lot of anger because of what you see happening to people that look like you. So I really felt prompted. As a matter of fact, I asked my pastor maybe about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I said, I feel something kind of rumbling on my insides, something that I believe God wants me to talk about. And so what I've done for the last couple of weeks, and he's given me the ability to do it the last couple of weeks, asked him, please don't make me do another week. I don't want to do a week this week. I want a break. But what I've been talking about is
you two now. You're gonna get 2 now. Since you said you're gonna get 2, just know it's coming.
But what we talked about is that that if we believe that Jesus was a son and we're called to be just as Jesus is, that when I see my brothers and sisters in the body, we need to start treating each other. Now, this might not be so great for some people, but I come from a family of 6 siblings, and we recently lost our dad, and we're in this position right now where we're having to have Zoom conversations about how we're going to distribute the estate. If you think about the prodigal, and there's this whole idea of how do we distribute the estate? And what it basically boils down to is that we're all siblings, that no matter what our personalities are, no matter what our beliefs are, no matter how we speak about our beliefs, whether that person is right or wrong. And I know this is tough, and these have been tough sermons, that I have to have an appreciation for the person that shares my faith, because we all have the same Lord. This is all the same Father. This is all, the Holy Spirit, the one that proceeds from Father, is a part of all of us that are part of the body. And it becomes my responsibility. I may not like what you say. I may not like that you said it. I may not like how you treat me. We may have to deal with that, in a small conversation, as Rick Law said, but, and we're not talking to each other, but we have to have some courage to have those conversations with people that don't look like us, that people that don't sound like us, people that don't think like us, people that don't, they're not asking the same questions that we're asking. They're not feeling the same levels of oppression that we're asking. But somehow God is saying, hey, you guys are siblings, work this out. And that's what I've been presenting. I said, you guys, we are the body. We are heirs, joint heirs with Jesus. We are heirs of God. We are in this together. If this thing gets fixed, it gets fixed because we learn how to not just tolerate each other, not just respect each other, but to say, that's my brother. I think he's wrong. I think she's wrong. What if they are wrong? I still have to love you as Christ loves me.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool, Kathy. John and I talked about this a couple months back, and how, frankly, I've kind of just disconnected from a lot of the conversations, because it feels like some of our voices have just been put aside preemptively. Like, nope, you don't get to have an input into this at all. Period. And after you get tired of arguing about it and trying to show that no, I've got the same heart you do and the same passion you do, I'm just seeing it different. You go through that a few times and you're just like, I'm out. I got better things to do than to keep that conversation going, and that's just sad, because that just keeps division going,
Well, Jeff Roberts and I were having a few Facebook discussions. Then we went to private messages with each other so we could work this out without everybody watching it. And one thing I really appreciate, because it was right after the George Floyd thing, and everybody trying to say all lives matter, and everybody and all these Christians, and I purposely was saying things on Facebook I knew would offend people. that Donald Trump was created by the white evangelical church. And he was brought by them. They overlooked his affairs. They overlooked his cheating on his taxes. They overlooked his not paying his taxes. They overlooked his with prostitutes. He went to a Christian prayer breakfast and used profanity. They kept overlooking everything he did, and it was cute, But now, having a spoiled brat to raise to the top, now you got what you asked for, So I lost a lot of white evangelical friends over the last few months, and some of them, one or two I eliminated, but the one was trying to tell me that like lynchings don't happen and all that and this and that, and you talking about the past. So I sent him like 16 different videos of police shootings, people being lynched, Bird down in Texas when he was dragged by the truck, the boy in Mississippi that was murdered. And I sent him, and he sent back, my God, why are you doing all that? I said, no, you told me it doesn't happen anymore. So I was just trying to tell you, it still happens, and we still don't have the justice, But like, one thing I learned early on, the civil rights movement did not move until the white preachers and the college kids came down to Mississippi and fought with them. When it was just the black people being lynched and hung and put in ditches, nobody was worried about it. Them college students from Boston and all that started showing up, and the white preachers from Chicago started coming down there. Then the civil rights movement moved. Not enough black people in America for us to change the country. So if we don't have unity, we won't change things as they are. And if people don't believe, they act like we're making up the being pulled over by the police, and you being worried, will I make it home? That's a real fact that every African American in this country I know agrees with. You never know how it's going to turn out. Now, fortunately, I've done criminal things and the police treated me right. So I don't know. I just got a personality that I make them laugh or whatever, but I was able to diffuse the situation. But by the same token, I still have that in the back of my mind. I taught my grandchildren, you turn the inside light on, you put your wallet out your pocket while you're pulling over, you put both hands on the steering wheel, everybody in the back seat, you put your hands on the headrest, nobody's hands moves until this thing is over. But I've had friends coming from church and they get pulled over by the police, laid down on the ground, they're in a suit with their family and everything, and they treat it like a dog, and then they're angry, So it's a conversation we need to have, and I'm not blaming the church, but it seems like they separate. They keep telling you all we need is Jesus. Well, we've had Jesus since the 1619, and it hasn't changed, right? Since the first slave got on the shores, these things haven't changed. And they keep talking, well, if we just come to Jesus, everything will happen. But we just come to Jesus, then we wouldn't have rapists, murderers, we wouldn't have abortion. There's nothing that's going on. If everybody gets saved, you can name it drug addiction, anything you want to name would be cured if they actually had a conversion. But God doesn't overrule personal choices. He doesn't overrule your free will. So, to me, like I said, I had a lot of heated discussions, and I appreciate what Jeff and I had a personal discussion. He asked me, what can I do, from my point of view? And I tell him, we don't want to be lectured. We just want somebody to listen and don't tell us it's our fault, or don't tell us we're too anxious. I got a lot of that. You're being over anxious. You're blowing it out. And I seen a man lay there and get choked for 46 seconds, and you telling me I'm blowing it out of proportion? When the police prevented other people from helping him, that was the police. And then you try to tell me we're blowing it all out of proportion. That's like Chris Rock said. If you have a pilot with a few bad apples, do you want to fly on that plane? One or two of these pilots might wreck. So let me get on the plane anyway. That whole thing. But that's what the conversation needs to move forward with. And I'm glad it is moving forward, because I really thank God for Donald Trump, because he brought all the false face off of everybody. Now there's no more fake. Hi, how you doing, my brother? God bless you. All that's been torn. He blew up the whole thing. So now we all got to be real. Like I told you that song today, John, I tell you, we only got time for the real. This is where we are right today.
The issue when you talk about the church, and I'm listening to everything you're saying, Jeff, and I'm in agreement. We're in an ugly situation. Mm-hmm. And Rick, you brought up the facts about the church and what we need to be. Well, the church has. Let me give you this example. In what was it, 2000? God took a alcoholic, drug addicted Australian who's probably agnostic, if not totally atheist. And he put out a movie called The Passion of the Christ. Mm. And the movie hit the theaters. Right. And pastors and church organizations and denominations screamed foul. Mm. Have you seen this movie? Do you see how violent this is? Our kids can't see this.
Right.
Mel Gibson he researched this thing. He was so on point with that time frame and all the weapons that were used. And I mean, he put, had been sitting in our air-conditioned, padded, seated, visually affected, wonderfully mic'd, HD, all that stuff we talked about, houses of worship, and we're worshiping everything but Christ.
Amen.
They hung him high, they stretched him wide, in 3 days he died. Well, that sounds cute till you see it.
Amen.
Till you see it. We couldn't even get real with why we are here. And that's why we are here. We couldn't accept the fact that it's no more than what you just saw, what they did to him prior and putting him on that cross is why you were here. We couldn't accept that. That was too much.
It occurs to me, John, that we don't hang, Jesus on a cross in our Protestant churches, but when he is hanging on one, he's always nice and cleaned up.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
What is that about?
I remember teaching Sunday school, Kathy, and you might remember this. And I had got a bootleg copy from the barbershop, which is where black folks get their movies from. And I went and got the DVD player and the TV, and I had the 7th grade, the junior highs and the high schoolers. And I went to Sam's Club and bought the taffy apple craft suckers and popcorn and all of this. They, ooh, we're gonna have fun. And they got in, and I cut the lights out, and I turned on that scene where they were beating it. And I let it ride till they got through, and I just stopped it. And I turned the lights on. You could hear a pin drop. And I asked the kids any thoughts or comments. I had a couple of people start crying. I got caught on the carpet. The old man wanted to know what I did, and I told him he didn't have a problem with it, but some of the parents got mad. So the next week, I just took us to the point where they were putting him on the cross and they killed him. And from that point on, I had 2 or 3 deacons down there every Sunday when I taught Sunday school. But like I didn't volunteer for this. You all forced me to do this. And you were talking about that change. You remember Jehovah's Posse? Yeah. You remember when the kids changed how we looked at this whole thing at Progressive? One of the things that we did, Rick and Jeff, you'll remember this, is we had a 3-church fellowship. It was us, it was First Pres and Emmanuel Baptist Church.
Emmanuel Baptist, yeah.
That was probably, I remember walking in the old Second Bank, Rick, after I had a meeting with you saying I was going to leave, but they brought me back in. I'm getting ready to quit my job and go on the streets, and you gave me a check to get me started. And I was going to Old Second to deposit that check in my bank account, and the teller said, I know you. And I'm like, yeah, she said, you went to Progressive. I went to First Pres. Whatever happened to those 3 church? And my wife and I was standing there going, wow. And then, the connection now was full circle because I was going back into that ministry.
Yeah.
Walking with money you gave me to support myself to do it. And here's a teller saying, we're missing the boat. We need to get back on the point of what we were doing. The relationships, the conversations in those groups were so powerful. Jeff, there was a family from each church that was assigned to a family from each church. And our goal was just to simply build relationships, to break bread at each other's houses, to have conversations. The things that grew, the relationships and the friendships that grew out of that are lifelong. I wanted Rick in my group when they said, no, you all know each other. You can't have it. Go find somebody else. But I mean, that's the conversations, they're not being had. Everybody's yelling at each other and nobody's listening.
Right.
How do we break that cycle? How do we even have an effective conversation?
Well, before we leave that, because I've got to tell you a story. All of you you've got to hear this story. So it takes a lot for a white guy to really understand systemic racism because we can't see it.
Not our story.
So one Saturday, so we're going all the way back to where, Jeff, you may well even been there. It was a Ministerial Alliance meeting, and it was up, by the bowling alley up there on Lake Street or North Lincoln Way, and there's a hotel that's behind there, and who knows what brand it was at the time, but it was we had rented a room, or the Ministerial Alliance had rented a Saturday morning room for this meeting of the Ministerial Alliance. And back in those days, I was really involved with that whole organization, and I was invited to be a part of that meeting. And back to everybody wearing suits, there was a number of distinguished looking. In fact, Charles Rent may well have been there. I don't know, but there were a number of distinguished looking men, and everybody was black but me. And we go walking into the hotel together. And Roy Brown, with his beautiful voice and his commanding presence, and I don't mean commanding like intimidating. I mean, it's just he's kind of got this warm hospitality. Right. He kind of was the leader, and we all walked together up to the counter to find out where the room is. And the young clerk behind the counter is white. And Pastor Brown says, he introduces this group, and we're having a meeting. Where's the room? And the young white person turns directly to me and gives the answer to the question. And it was embarrassing to at that moment realize what had just happened, because that young white guy was not doing that on purpose. He is programmed, to respond to the white guy, even though it was the black man who had addressed him, and everybody around me looked better than me. So at that particular moment was the first time that I could feel what it was like to have this person next to me become invisible. All these people around me become invisible because I was the one responded to, and I didn't say a word. So those are the sort of things that come out of us actually having real relationship with each other.
Amen.
Spending time with each other, caring enough about each other. So anyway, I just wanted to share that story because it's always been one of the most powerful experiences of my life, and which of course in this current conversation constantly comes to mind because of really having the honor of being there with that group. Why was I there? I wasn't there because I was a lawyer. Technically, I was there because I was a lawyer, but I really was there because I was a brother in Christ.
Yes, 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 yes.
It's true.
And, we
there's a comedian on CNN called W. Kamal Bell, and he said he was playing with his wife. He lives in Berkeley, California, and he's playing with his wife outside of a restaurant. And he kept teasing. She kept, "Come on, leave me alone, leave me alone." And they called the police on him for harassing this white woman that was his wife. And he was talking about how, they were going to arrest him and take him away because this white woman had told him to leave me alone. She was playing with him, but the clerk called the police on him because he said, "You can see my kids were mixed sitting there. He could have at least guessed that." But and that's like what Rick was saying. John Maxwell had a thing where he says, when you're in a meeting and you want to know who's in charge of the meeting, look at who people look at when a question is asked. Don't look at who's holding the meeting. He said his first church, that the deacons told him to do this, do that. And he said, "Thank you, Pastor, do the prayer." He did the prayer. And he said, "End it." He said he did it. And he said, whenever a question was asked, the head deacon was the one everybody turned to. He said he learned that principle. When you're in a meeting, who do they look at when the question comes up? And that's the person with the power.
So where do we see the church having the effective conversation about any of this? We don't.
I went through Promise Keepers and all this stuff, right? When we were all, and I remember when I was at Promise Keeper 94 in Indianapolis, and they told you to find a black guy to apologize for what your family did. And I was one of maybe 14 black guys that were there, and I had a line of white guys lined up for as far as I could see. One guy was telling me, one guy told me he burned crosses with his grandfather. Another guy told me he did this and that. And they were all asking me to forgive them and stuff. And I kept telling them, I don't hold anything against you. And if your grandfather was sitting here with my grandfather, believe me, this conversation would have happened anyway. But the thing I learned about that, when they were trying to, build relationships and everything, you had to start at ground zero and be honest with each other. I can't blame you for everything that happened in the past, and you can't make up for everything that happened in the past.
Right.
But we can discuss the future. What can we do to work together? I was so happy to see all those young people of different colors and white people protesting about George Floyd. Because the first thing I panicked, oh Lord, these black people gonna get everybody killed. But when I looked at the street and saw the majority were white and Latino and whatever, and and I'm like, wow. So that means the young generation gets it. We are only gonna make it if we do it together. The older generation has all their issues, but the young people, they're not worried about gay, they're not worried about this and that. They're worried about how do we survive as humanity.
So in the civil rights movement, we saw Dr. King and Abernathy and all of those, but we also saw the Jewish rabbi. Right. We saw the radical white Christian pastor. We saw the Catholic priests that were white standing with us. Again, I see the kids, I see the people. The civil rights movement, the meetings happened in the black church. We can't go into the building, but where is the church was out front. I mean, if you contrary to popular belief, it was Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. It was Reverend Ralph Abernathy. They were, John Lewis wasn't a minister, but he was on his way to being a great leader in Congress. But he stood and he followed their leads. Where is the church at all? I don't even see Father Flager out there anymore, and that's interesting. And normally he's probably the most radical thing I've seen come out of Chicago in 40 years.
Well, he's 73 too.
Well, okay, I get it. But at the end of the day, where is the church so far removed from what's happening, or it just doesn't care?
Big business now.
Huh?
You don't want to affect the bottom line with a lot of churches. You will never see Creflo Dollar or T.D. Jakes or somebody that gets a lot of money from this thing. Now, T.D. Jakes will speak up occasionally, but Creflo Dollar will never affect the bottom line. And a lot of that is about the bottom line. Same thing with Joel Osteen. He's not going to affect his bottom line. You won't hear him be controversial because it's the bottom line. It takes a lot of money to heat that sanctuary. It takes a lot of money to turn that air conditioning on. So Joel is not going to offend anybody.
So
what did Michael Jordan say? Always protect the brand. Is that what he said? Republicans and Democrats buy gym shoes. Is that what he was famous for?
I think it's deeper than that, though, Jeff. I think the church has just been put on the sidelines, and it goes back to what Rick was talking about. We're just in a world now where we don't really care what the church has to say about anything, and if the church does dare to speak up about something, it's going to be perceived as wrong.
Right.
And so I think in a lot of ways it's been pushed onto the sideline, and it's okay there, just sits there and doesn't see a way to have that impact again.
But one of the ways that would stand out is the way that Christ has not just offered, but commanded from the time that he walked the planet with us. And that was that we should love each other and not judge each other. Catherine brought this up before about, as a carnal person, I'm critical and judgmental. But at the same time, if we are actually trying, we're spending time on Saturday to discuss this for the hope of being some small part of, being a spark to a bigger fire that's designed to burn out the parts that really aren't right, that really aren't Christ-like. And what we need to do, if black and white were actually together, you are right, Jeff, that it was white folks and white kids that were downtown. In fact, I got a call from this guy named John Martin, and he said, "I have hope." I said, "Well, what do you have hope about?" He says, "I have hope because the white kids went and demonstrated downtown, and they won't shoot the white kids downtown." It's not just us, in our own neighborhood, burning our own buildings. Right. The white kids are downtown. Well, right now, those white kids aren't church kids.
No.
Are they?
No.
So instead of, maybe they are, but they're not there because Jesus commands us to recognize that every single human being, I always love Mother Teresa's quote about holding a dying leper in her arms. And somebody said to her, "I wouldn't do that for $1 million." And she looked up and said, "Neither would I." But this is the face of Christ.
Amen.
This is the face of Christ.
Amen.
The church is out of the building. Should it remain out of the building? That's the last part of this. Then we'll go to the next topic, and we'll have about 20 minutes to finish up. Should it stay outside the building? Do we need to come back in the building? This is what we talked about earlier. I get it. Some folks are traditionally stuck, but Kathy said they're starting to learn the truth now. They're redirecting the energy from misdirection to "Thus saith the Lord," and let's follow Jesus and march to the Jordan and get to the promised land. Do we need to do as much inside the walls of those buildings? And if we're going to do it, does it need to be the same thing? I guess would be my question.
I think we need both. I think we need I think we need the ability for people to see that don't want to be, that don't want to sit in the congregation, or they have fears or maybe some anxiety about going back to the congregation or going back into the sanctuary. But I also think that we need to have that physical community. I'm gonna tell you, I haven't been in church since March the 8th. I miss our church, March the 8th.
Okay.
It's 7 months ago, and you know, I've seen a handful.
Virtual hug there, Kathy, because you need that.
Thank you. I see the people. I'm in my office right now. I see the people at work 5-6 days a week. I have not seen people that that we share the same faith, or we're sitting under the same leadership. I haven't seen them in months. So we need connection. We're humans. We need interaction. We need touch. It needs to be more than just visual and audio. There needs to be. I need to be able to physically touch, or even to smell that there's another person there. But I do think that we need to continue the online component. So I think we need both, and I think this is an opportunity for us to develop what both look like, because I don't know that we can bring everybody back to the sanctuary the same way we left. It may just look different.
Yeah, I kind of wonder, there's going to be a lot of commercial buildings sitting empty for a long time. You'll probably be able to get a lot of them for $50. And I'm wondering if there aren't going to be some church buildings that might just be the same way. Like, how come we need, a 10,000 square foot building? I don't know, but Kathy's right. I mean, we need to get together, though. And I don't know how you do that or what that looks like. I think it's going to look different than it did before. And that's why I like the little church that I sneak off to, because we should still do the hugs, and sometimes we're wearing masks, and sometimes we might not be. But I need that. I go to the big church, and man, we got to keep the muzzles on. We got to keep 10 feet away from everybody, and it's like, why bother? I don't. It's just no. I'd rather just sit home.
Well, no, I was talking to one pastor friend of mine that said he was paying something like $2,000 a month to rent a church in New Jersey, and they were just getting ready to go up on the rent when COVID hit. And he told him he wasn't going to renew his lease, and he said he probably knows they probably think it was because of that, but he said no, it just he rented it for an hour a week, for the month, and it was $2,000. New Jersey real estate prices are crazy, and the thing about it, he said, since then his church is all virtual, and if they want to get together, they'll rent a hall and have an event or whatever. But he said from now on, he doesn't see ever wanting another building again.
Wow.
He said now they can pay him a salary and stuff, which they didn't have before. So he's just saying to him, he doesn't want another building. So I say, so some pastors are going to look at it like that, and all these mega buildings and these things, like you said, there's going to be a lot of empty real estate. And I was listening to the thing that John did last week, where they were talking about somebody took out $1 million loan to try to keep that church going. That's a deep loan. I remember watching Bishop Clarence McClendon, and he was saying it was $20,000 each time he turned the air on for Sunday service for that stadium he had, our old basketball stadium he was having service in. He said each service was like $20,000. So if he had 3 services a day, that's $60,000 he had to raise just to turn the lights on in the air. So, and you realize with a sport team, they have the money, but with a church, it's a totally different thing. So they're going to have to rethink the whole plan. And the mega church is probably going to take the bigger hit, because if you look at it, Jesus' church never really grew past 40 or 50 itself. But he had mega events, but for the most part, he had 30 people running around with him. If you count the women, maybe 50.
Pretty much. Interesting concept.
And the majority of churches in America are under 150 members. That's still something that's held for all these years.
Lot of things we could have did with a lot of money and some different buildings and some different locations, community centers in impoverished neighborhoods, learning centers. There's a lot we could do that actually would make a bigger difference than just having that one building to hang out in on Sunday and Wednesday. That's kind of the way I look at it. I honestly, the last church I belonged to was, and it was for a minute, I helped my man get it started down in Columbus, Georgia. Then I ended up with a job that worked on Sundays. But I was always a supporter of him. I couldn't get there. If I was off, I would go. But before then, the last church I actually belonged to was in Williamsburg, Virginia. You know, and I left Williamsburg in 2015, and it was basically the last year I was there that I answered the ad in the paper for a drummer for this little small church. And I answered it, and the pastor called me up, and come to find out he was a auxiliary James City County Sheriff and the chaplain for the James City County Sheriff's Department, which is Williamsburg's police department. I met him at Wendy's up the street from me. He was in uniform and I was in shorts. I'm assuming he knew I was black on the phone. I knew he was white, listening to his voice. And we just talked about it. He found out what I had been. I'd been a chaplain. I was licensed. And he was like, well, man, I'd love to have you. I don't pay a whole lot. I said, well, I just want to play. You know, and I'm tired of the secular. So I got there. It was a Wesleyan church. But we ended up joining. I ended up teaching Sunday school and Bible studies. And honestly, the first Bible study I taught was a men's group. There were about 8 of us in the room. And the next Sunday, the guy that was there, him and his wife had been there. And we had been there about a month and a half, 2 months before he asked me to teach. And he wasn't there Sunday, and I came back on Wednesday night, and the old man said, let me talk to you real quick. He said, John, I just want to tell you before you find out from somebody else, brother so-and-so and his wife left the church. I'm like, really? What happened? He said, because you're teaching. Right. Wow. I'm sitting there looking at this man thinking, okay, I didn't want to create this problem for you. You know, I'm like, this isn't good. And he's like, well, look, you know, it is what it is. That was his mentality about it. But, you know, and when we left Williamsburg, we really missed those people. There were 4 blacks in the church, and one guy was married to a white woman. The other one was a young sheriff, and me and my wife. That was it. And the other couple is going to sit on one of my panels. But it was interesting. Here we are in 2015, right, or late 14, and this is happening. You know, because I'm sitting here and I'm teaching, you were tolerating me as long as I sat on there and beat the drums and didn't open my mouth. But when I exercise what I'm called to do, you couldn't take it. Okay, so how long? And that person was a startup member of that church, man. And he's been knowing Sam Fry all his life. He knew Sam Fry's dad. That's why he ended up being in church with that man. It's sad. I mean, people are sitting in the church spiritually lost. What'd you say, Jeff? Because you sit in McDonald's doesn't make you a Big Mac? I used to always say this because you sit in the garage doesn't turn you into an Oldsmobile.
Right, no, that's right.
It doesn't even exist anymore. But
just because you bought TurboTax don't make you an accountant.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it. So as far as the church staying outside the walls, no, you're right, Kathy. I do miss the fellowship, and I'm so biased. I miss the fellowship I had at Progressive. I don't miss it from anywhere else like I miss what we had at Progressive. That was a whole different. That was something that was just meant to be. We all had to experience that to make us better people, to understand who God really was and who our enemy was. You know,
I miss what you had at Progressive, and I wasn't there that much, but walking in the doors, I felt warm and accepted, and it was a level field. It was just a different kind of place, you know.
And it was interesting because there was a heinous murder that took place in that building.
Really?
Bob Wesby. Yeah. They killed him in the building.
Oh my gosh.
They literally almost beheaded him. There was blood from the vestibule to the back walls of the church. Oh my gosh.
As a matter of fact, when I think about that, I remember the first Sunday that we were preparing, really the next Sunday when it was time to have service. You know, my parents, my mother. I don't know if you went. You and Lorraine went, Brother John. They cleaned up blood so that we could come in and worship on that Sunday. It was a pretty traumatic, unusual circumstances brought about great great
Wow.
community.
So,
Yeah, I remember because they did the remodeling and they got rid of the Jesus with the afro.
yeah.
Yeah. I grew up, I was Gwen Bailey and
I had to show you some pictures, Jeff. Yeah. And
but
the
that's
two
the first thing
escape
I
bathrooms
noticed when
in
I
the
came
basement
back.
on
They
the
got
side.
rid of the
Those
Jesus
were
up
left too,
front.
so the choir members couldn't sneak to the basement and have a cigarette during church service. So, we talked about this virtual thing, and it's good. But what do we see as some of the pitfalls of this?
I think you've already discussed you lose the human touch, but another thing about virtue is I read this one lady posted on Facebook. She had a computer, a laptop, an iPad, and all that. Talking about I'm church hopping this morning. So basically she could watch all these different services at one time, and that's basically what it's become. But then again, you have people that weren't watching church before or don't feel comfortable coming into a church. Because I've had people tell me they couldn't go to church because they didn't have a suit, or they don't feel right, or they feel condemned when they come in the building. Everybody's looking at them. And some of those things are eliminated. But for those that need the fellowship, it's a good thing because you need fellowship. We were built as human beings to be with each other, And I think one of the casualties of this whole thing is just going to be that some people that are so traditional. I have some minister friends of mine that are so stuck to traditions they've been doing all their life, that they just can't break these things. And I think they're having mental problems dealing with the church the way it is. Some of them go to their office and sit in their big old office just to have a Bible study. When they could do it at home just as easy, but they got to be behind a sacred desk. Yeah, and all that stuff, And some of the things you got to break. You got to realize, is it worth it? And if the church is going to move forward and reinvent itself, basically update itself, then it has to look at, I went to a conference with Tony Dan Helka with the National Baptist, and I was telling them in Dallas, and I was telling them that we spend money on things that people won't come and participate in. But if you want to get youth to come, build a video arcade, a big video arcade, let them play games free for an hour if they'll come listen to a message, or 2 hours. Give them free pizza and stuff. I said, what do kids pay to do? They pay to go to arcades. They pay to go skating. They pay to go. So if the church built one of those, they would get the youth to come in and just give them a message. But they didn't want to hear that. But that's how you reinvent the wheel.
I think there's going to be trouble for pastors in trying to somehow create or retain ownership of their people, of the church, because now it's so easy just to, in effect, you're holding the power cord in your hand, and I can connect it and disconnect it whenever I want to. And so if there's no building and there's no way to build that sense of community, you're going to have a hard time creating that sense of ownership in your people. That's a huge one, I think, to figure out how to overcome.
And I would agree with Jeff, because I think for the long haul, just as I just watched John, you and Jeff and Catherine celebrate the golden time at Progressive, that golden time together. See, and because I even am a little part of that golden time together, we have our own community. When we actually started this, it turned out that we have a relationship, not just through Jesus Christ, but actually through Progressive, and that's part of what kind of holds us together. Let's not overlook that really is, to me, the biggest pitfall. The biggest pitfall of the virtual church is that we're not building ties to each other member of the congregation. We're not having those interstitial moments that happened at the church picnic, that happened when we were raising our kids together, when we're doing other things. We're not there to find out that someone that we love didn't show up, and it's because of her husband left her that week, or there was a miscarriage, or there's a whatever. We're not getting that information around to each other. So that to me, one of the biggest weaknesses of it going forward.
How do we avoid that?
Well, I don't think that we've yet figured, right now, as it was said earlier, maybe it was Pastor Jeff has said that, it was how so many of us have had to learn. Maybe with Jeff, I never really cared for using Zoom, and I didn't have any particular need for it whatsoever. But March the 20th, when I had to gather my legal team together and say, I've been prepared for the last number of years for the young people to take over. Well, as of today, it's now. And so I'll see you on TV. So maybe as part of our growth, we have to find ways. And I think Catherine's already brought it up that they're having Bible studies and other things. And I think we're going to have to somehow weave into this ways for communication to go on, because those of us that are extroverts, we don't have a problem, reaching out to other people if we feel there's something to communicate. But at least half the people in the congregation are introverts. Right. They have a hard time being heard because they won't talk very easily. So I think we have to develop some sort of a heart for how do we get the introverts to share their story and be vulnerable so we can minister to them. I don't know how to do that yet.
Well, we keep instant texts. People will text you any situation they're going through in the prayer line. So we have prayer texts.
That's good. That's good right there.
We update each other. So you find out the things if somebody is going through something, if their sister just died or whatever, so immediately we start praying for each other and send each other encouraging things back and forth.
That's very good. That's very good.
But that's because of the relationship that's already been built too, Jeff. When we start talking and I get what Rick's talking about, how do you deal with this when you have a larger church and you may not have the staff to maintain with everybody, and there's that person out there that's on that island, and they think they're on that island and they don't communicate and they don't understand that they need to use these tools. I think these are the people that they are most vulnerable in this time right now. I know a lot of what's going on because a whole lot of people post it on social media. But again, there are a whole lot of people that won't touch social media. And I find out when it's almost too late or after the fact, that something has gone down, and because they didn't talk or their circle is very small. But, I care about them and they know I do, but I just never found out. Yeah, and you want to be able to. Ministry just simply means meet the need. I had a friend of mine that I met in Virginia. His wife just passed, and I knew she had bouts with cancer, but I didn't realize that it had gotten as bad as it did. That this past June they actually took her leg, and then she passed 2 weeks ago. When I saw the post, I had to call him, and I called him. I said, "Look, brother, I have no words other than I love you." And he began to tell me everything that had transpired since the last time we talked, and I had talked with her on her birthday, which was back in the fall, not even realizing she had the leg amputated. And I told him, brother, you don't have to relive this, on my purpose. But what it was doing was that's what he wanted and felt he needed to do. And I just sat there and listened. But again, everybody doesn't share things that you don't know about it. And sometimes that call just to say I love you. But I have no words for a man who loses his wife. I'm fortunate I still have mine. When Roy called me and told me his wife had passed, I had no word.
Right.
I actually hung the phone up and cried and called him back that night and told him I loved you. And that was all I could do. Did I show up down there? And that was the last time I saw your dad. Was at Georgia. And I don't do funerals. I don't, but I didn't do that one. I just kind of hung on the outside, but I was there for him, because I knew that brother would make that walk for me. But, we have to figure out ways to keep loving each other.
Wait. Time out. Catherine is Roy Brown's daughter?
No, Charles.
Oh.
Charles,
Okay.
Charles was at Charles. No. That's how rumors started. That's how stuff gets started in the church.
I was just going to love her a little more deeply. That's
well,
all.
Technically, she's his spiritual daughter.
Yeah.
I hear you. Well, and we're Hoosiers, so we.
And God will forgive you, especially you being a Packers fan. So come on, the church has to have the same relationship Jeff and I have. Yeah. He's a Packer fan. I'm a Bears fan. We go at each other constantly about that. But mess with him,
Right.
and you have to deal with me too.
Right.
Back on your topic, I got 3 or 4 guys that come to my Tuesday night group just because they're so lonely and disconnected. And I'm wondering, there's probably 40 or 50 more that they represent that aren't coming, and the mental health issues and just that, my daughter's in that mode. She just sits in the house scared, and it's just sad.
We have to keep ministering. We have to keep loving. We have to keep finding ways to continually to build the relationships throughout the body. And Kathy, you're right. There's some things we have to fix. There's some things we definitely have. And the misinformation, the spiritual captivity, I call it, that has to change. It has to change because, Jeff, like you said, grace, and I listened to Meek say this the other day, and I sent you the link. Grace and mercy is something that none of us deserve. It was absolutely free. And if you don't live in that, then you're not living with Jesus, because that's how you live with him, is live in his grace and mercy. Look at you. Look, spiritual. There we go. It is 2:30 on the head. People, I want to say thank you, because once again, we proved that we can have a conversation about this faith that we have, this awesome radical Savior that we love, that doesn't have to be holier than thou, beating somebody over the head with scripture, and have a serious conversation about hard things within the body and walk away understanding that we love each other. I'm so blessed to have had the four of you on here, the three gentlemen and the one sister in this thing. All of you have been an inspiration in my life. All of you. Kathy, I just watched you. There were days I'd be jealous. I wish I could have grown up like that. Why did my life have to be so hard? But your life has not been a piece of cake. So you see these things, and Rick and Jeff, you have been there in some of my darkest times. And some of my darkest times were when we were having conversations this past summer. They literally were, in my opinion, some of my darkest times. Because when you look inside yourself and realize, yeah, you've been wrong about a few things and how you looked at this thing, it's not easy. JD, we've been walking since '86, brother.
I was thinking that picture there. We used to be in your living room on King Street.
Oh my God!
You remember that? That picture goes a long way back.
Graduation, man, '94. You not kidding about that? Well, look, folks, I'm going to say thank you. Okay. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to be very mindful of your time for giving up this hour and a half, actually 2 hours today on a Saturday. If you would be open, I'm going to do, I've said 4, but I'm going to do 5. I want to pull one person from each group together and do a last one, just kind of a recap. Not sure who I'd be calling, so if you'd be willing to sit in on that, just let me know. It will be sometime in November. Let's just all keep each other in prayer, keep this thing lifted up. That's all I'm going to say. And Rick, would you give us the honor and lead us out of here in a prayer?
Sure. Father God, thank you for this wonderful time of sharing from our heart. Thank you for breaking our hearts.
Yes, Lord.
For you. Thank you for your broken heart for us. And thank you for all those who have gone before each one of us that brought us to know Jesus in some special way, that he became a transforming power in our own lives. Father, use us as we move forward in the various ministries that you still have left for us during our time here. In the name of Christ, hallelujah. Amen.
Folks, thank you. Enjoy your weekend. I will be in touch. God bless you.
Adios.
All right.
Go Pack, go.